Welcome to the latest Seahawks Draft Blog live stream. It is draft day. Rob Staten with you here, and with very little to do in the last few hours before the start of the NFL draft, thought I'd just jump on, share some thoughts on everything that's been talked about since last night and today. A lot of the draft boards, a lot of the intel, a lot of what the mock drafts are saying, and what it means for the Seahawks. So we're going to get into that in a second. If you have any super chats, any questions that you want to send in, I will answer them as well. And we'll just run through some topics if you want to get them into the super chat there. So first thing I wanted to start with today was looking at the mock drafts. And if you had read a mock draft with probably anybody over the last month who's, you know what I mean, like the national media, the people who have got the sources, the people who speak to GMs, a lot of the mock drafts were the same. Like typically you would see Mason Graham going number 5 to the Jaguars. You'd see Ashton Jeanty going number 6 to the Raiders. Then the Jets would probably take Armand Membu, Jalen Walker number 8, etc., etc. You might see a quarterback at 9. And then, like the week before the draft, you all of a sudden saw that being ripped up, and everyone was trying to guess what everyone was doing, and all of the top 10s looked different. And then last night, just when you think it can't get any more unusual and unpredictable, there are a couple of mock drafts that come out and they take it to another step. And the first one, and I'm going to share it up on the screen, was Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft, which was so different than, say, Peter Schrager's mock draft or Todd McShay's mock draft or the one that Mike Mayock did with Rich Eisen. And either Daniel Jeremiah is going to be looking absolutely fantastic in a few hours, or this is pretty out there. And I'm going to talk about the things that I mean in terms of it being pretty out there. So I think as a top 10, it more or less makes sense. There is a common theme that Kelvin Banks is going to go 6th overall to the Raiders. I don't think Armand Membu at 7 or Mason Graham at 8, Mikael Williams at 9 or Tyler Warren at 10 is pretty out there. But then you get to number 11 and all of a sudden you see Gray Zabel, and we'll come back to this in a moment because the conventional wisdom was that Zabel was going to be the 18th overall pick to Seattle. And then in the last 48 hours, you're hearing the Cowboys might take him or the Dolphins might take him. And now this is the first mock draft where you have the San Francisco 49ers at number 11 taking Gray Zabel, the player that most people think was going to end up in Seattle. So that's interesting. We will come back to that. Put a pin in that one. We'll come back to it in a bit. You have the Broncos trading up for Colston Loveland. There's been a fair bit of talk about them moving up, whether it's for Jeanty or for one of these tight ends. There's also been a bit of local reporting in Denver suggesting, I'm not sure they're going to do that. They may just stick and take Amari and Hampton, but, we will see. And then it gets interesting as you go through the teams, like Jalen Walker. Like, what have we heard for like the last 2 or 3 weeks? We heard Mike Mayock saying Jalen Walker might be better than Abdul Carter. We've had Todd McShay saying he's not going to last. He's going to go very, very early. On McShay's podcast, he's been talking about, is there a possibility that he will go number 4 to the New England Patriots and that, 5, 6, 7, he's not going to get past them. I think just a few days ago, he was saying Walker probably won't get to the Panthers at number 8. And there's all this talk online that the Panthers are up for trading down. And many have assumed that's because Jalen Walker won't be there, that he's not going to be there at number 8. And they don't like maybe Michael Williams enough to take him there. So they move down. And yet here, Daniel Jeremiah has Jalen Walker at number 15. Put a pin in that. We'll come back to that as well. You've got Emeka Egbuka at 16. I had him at 25 in my mock. And I feel that let me let you into a secret. Anybody who does a final mock draft absolutely hates everything about that process. Because when you do a final mock draft, that's it. There's no going back next week and looking at another idea. Like when I do the mock drafts, I like to present scenarios and create talking points. Hey, this might happen, therefore it impacts the Seahawks in this way, stuff like that. When you're in a final one, you're basically saying, this is my best guess at what's going to happen. For 99% of the people doing the mock drafts, that's based on very little or no intel, and yet you are kind of held accountable for it. Like, how the hell are you supposed to guess what these teams are supposed to do? So everybody hates it. And so having Egbuka there, like if I was to say, I think Egbuka is legitimately one of the 20 best players in this draft. and I've got him at 25. And I think, why did I put him at 25? Why didn't I back my own feeling on this and put him at number 16 or a bit earlier than that, or have him as in consideration for the Cowboys? If Zabel can go 11, why can't Egbuka go a bit earlier than some people were saying? So I'm a bit disappointed in myself that I had him as low as 25, but I think it's interesting that Daniel Jeremiah has him as high as 16. You've obviously got the Giants trading up to Seattle's pick, and we'll come back to that as well. Bucks taking a receiver. I haven't seen that touted much. And I think that's pretty much the main intrigue. I mean, Jahdae Barron lasting to 29 would be quite something. So there's a lot to get into it, a lot to get stuck into. Let's start with, Zabel's stock. I understand why he might go as high as this, and we've talked about it a fair bit. When you have the offseason that he's had, where I thought his Senior Bowl was a bit overrated, but everybody thinks it was amazing. He's had a testing profile. He's delivered a testing profile, which is up there with the very best defensive lineman in the NFL. Explosive traits are a good indicator of success. He's extremely explosive. I know that it said in Dane Brugler's draft article that his short shuttle was something like a 4.60. I had a look at that short shuttle again today. I've timed it about 15 times now. I can't find a way that it's any higher than a 4.40. So he is an elite tester. He is as a character player, a flawless fit. You're not going to have any issues with him. And while he may never reach the heights of some of the best defensive linemen in the league, he might not go on to be Frank Ragnow if he plays center, or Creed Humphrey, or he may never be a Zach Martin type level player. But he gives you a chance to have a legit, solid, quality starting guard or center for the next 10 years. And in a draft where you have very few stars, and it really is a quest to find starters in the first round, he is a surefire, safe, solid starter with upside to be way more than that. With the upside, people will talk about the upside of a Shamar Stewart because he jumped well, or they'll talk about the upside of Nick Emenwari because he jumped well. No one talks about the fact that Gray Zabel jumped a 37.5-inch vertical. That's more impressive at 315 pounds than some of the stuff that Nick Emenwari and Shamar Stewart were doing. Like, the upside of Gray Zabel is probably as high as anybody in this draft class who isn't called Armand Membu. That's how good he is. So if you're wondering, why is he going to go as high as that? That's potentially why. Upside could be through the roof. Solid player. He's going to have very minimal chance, in my opinion, of flaming out and being a disaster. And he plays an important position, offensive line. And you could try him at different positions. And the Colts, but people say, he can't play tackle with his arm length. The Colts have started 2 tackles with short arms for the last few years. And their offensive line hasn't been too bad. So that's why he could potentially go that early. And increasingly, I don't think he's going to last at 18. Because it's not just San Francisco at 11. It is potentially the Cowboys at 12. It is the Dolphins at 13. It is the Colts at 14. It is the Cardinals at 16. Maybe even the Bengals at 17. I just, for me, if you are like me, hoping that maybe Zabel's going to be there at 18, I'm losing faith. And maybe that's just, maybe I'm a victim to the moment here, that too many people are just mocking him to go before Seattle's pick, and I'm just reacting too much to it. But I'm losing confidence that he's going to be there at 18. And if he is, I think you just take him. You feel good about it. You've got a really good offensive line. All the things I've just said, you get him in there. I don't really understand the people who are not excited about this. I'm seeing a lot of stuff online. I'm not going to call anybody out, but it seems to me like people online who have spent several years complaining about the Seahawks passing on players like Gray Zabel for other flashier athletes at less important positions are now actively kind of hoping that they'll pass on Gray Zabel for those exact same players again. it feels like a little bit of a contradiction for me. And I think he is, I've said this for a few weeks now. I know people who don't grade him as highly as I do, who know their stuff, but I think he's a legit top 20 pick. And I think he'd be a fantastic pick for the Seahawks. So we'll see if he lasts at 18. What if he's gone? Who could they potentially pivot for? Let's look at this mock draft in particular and see what the options could be. So Donovan Ezeraku's off the board at 17. He could be an option for them, potentially. I wouldn't rule out an edge. So he could be an option. They could move to the other offensive lineman and just say, look, there's a hole at left guard and it needs to be filled. And with the lineman coming off the board quickly, which is what everybody's saying is going to happen, can't afford to wait until round 2 for that. So we're going to pivot and take either Donovan Jackson, who can slot in immediately at left guard, high character, explosive tester, not as good as Zabel, but not a million miles behind. Someone who can do a lot of the things I've just said about Gray Zabel. I think Zabel's upside is like a little higher, but Jackson is an excellent offensive lineman. For what it's worth, the person who I've been sort of talking about, my source, who doesn't rate Gray Zabel as a good use of a first-round pick, believes that Donovan Jackson is a second or third round pick. So I just want to put that out there so that people know, like someone like that, when I say Zabel's not worth it, it's not like he thinks this individual who knows his stuff. It's not like he thinks Donovan Jackson's a surefire top 20 pick and Zabel isn't. Like, I don't think he thinks either of them are worth a first round pick, but that might be about some positional value that he believes. So it could be Donovan Jackson. There are people out there who really like Josh Connolly. And the thing about Josh Connolly is he does have the speed and the foot quickness that they will look for in this scheme. And he has got some good tape. There were various games last season where you watch him and you think, yeah, this he's got something about him. I do think he lacks power and strength. And if he's going to be drafted by Seattle, you're going to have to kick him inside. And I think that could be an issue. I think when you get him out on the move, he's going to be fine. But when you need a yard, is he going to be able to get you a yard in the red zone? Is sort of the questions I would have. But for this scheme and this system, he is a fit. When you listen to certain people talk about him, I went back and watched the Mike Tice piece on him. Mike Tice thinks he's the best defensive lineman in the draft. Greg Cassell is a big fan of him as well. It's possible, plausible that the Seahawks agree with that take and think, well, we'll just take him and put him inside at guard. My fear with that is I think you will end up with Charles Cross at left tackle and Charles Cross at left guard. And I wasn't a big Charles Cross guy. I thought he was a second-round pick. I'm not a big Josh Connolly guy. I think he's a second-round pick. And I think what the Seahawks need right now, if they're going to be the kind of Baltimore team, even with the zone, the outside zone that they're going to run, I think they need to hammer somebody up front. They need to hammer somebody right in the face in that offensive line and be able to get a yard. And I think Zabel can do that. I think Tyler Booker can do that. I think Donovan Jackson can do that. I'm not sure that Josh Connolly can. I think Connolly might be better off at left tackle as well, if you're going to draft him for this kind of system. But he's a fit in the system. So I think he's an option. And then, Tyler Booker, I think the fact that if he really did run a 4.65 short shuttle, then I think that gives you an idea of some of the foot speed there. But, I was listening to somebody speak. This wasn't even a football thing, by the way. This was like just a gym thing about explosive traits and how, and it was this individual was saying, it was an English soccer player, actually, a football player. And he was talking about speed it comes from explosive qualities. Like your speed comes down to your explosion. And Tyler Booker is one of the worst explosive testers to come into the NFL in years. So if we're wondering why has he not got any speed, that is why, because he is not an explosive player. And I do wonder a little bit how much that is going to impact him at the next level, and in particular how that impacts him in this scheme. Short shuttle, very, very good for his size. To run a 4.65 at 325 pounds is really impressive. The way that he got around the field at the Combine and at Pro Day, I think, again, very, very impressive. If they took him at 18, I'd have no issue with it. But it's just whether or not they truly believe that he's a fit, and I think that remains a big question mark. And then the other sort of more obvious options here, Emeka Egbuka's gone, so they can't take him. But Malachi Starks is taken 20th overall. That's 2 picks after where Seattle would be. I think Malachi Starks would be a great pick for the Seahawks. I don't think safety is a massive pressing need, but I think Malachi Starks would be a great alternative if they're not going to go with an offensive lineman. In this situation, Matthew Golden's available. Again, receiver not the biggest need. Matthew Golden has the kind of character that the Seahawks like. He's not a legit 4-3 runner. People have shown that with the way that the testing was all skewed when he was at the combine, and he set off running before the clock started. So he's probably more of a 4-4 runner, but he isn't an option for them there because of the character. Kenneth Grant is available. The word, several people have put this out there now, that the people with Michigan connections really like Kenneth Grant. Now, I think to balance that out a little bit, Grant is somebody who has tantalizing physical tools and quickness for his size, but his play is massively inconsistent. There are some good examples of high effort plays to sort of run across the line and finish at his size. Vita Vea was one of the few people I've seen. I watched Vita Vea live and watched him move off the line, run to the sideline at his size, and I couldn't believe the effort and the mobility that he had. And Kenneth Grant's got a little bit of that about him. Vita Vea is a completely different beast compared to Kenneth Grant, but they share that sort of ability to get out and the move at their size. But there were too many plays on tape where you just wanted to kick him up the arse and say, come on, do a bit more. And he just didn't do that. But if the Michigan guys think there's something there, he can be Dexter Lawrence, then of course there's going to be interest. I think there's two things from the Seahawks perspective on Kenneth Grant. The first thing is, do you want to spend back-to-back top 20 picks on a defensive tackle? Like, at what point are you just sort of chucking, I have no issue with investing in lines, but how often are you going to be investing in your defensive line, stacking up all those players, in pumping all that resource in there, while, for example, your offensive line remains untouched? And if you have Kenneth Grant a top 20 pick, Byron Murphy a top 20 pick, and you've still got to get Jaron Reed on the field, and you've still got to get Leonard Williams on the field, it all seems a bit much. I know people are going, they need a nose tackle. It's absolutely true, especially since Cam Young's career seems to be sadly over, that they need to bring in somebody who can hold the middle, and Jonathan Hankins is not re-signed. So they need somebody who can do that job. It's whether you need somebody to do what is effectively a 2-down role with the 18th overall pick in the draft. Or can you just go and get somebody a bit later on, Nazir Stackhouse, Cam Jackson, somebody like that, who can do that job for you in a much later pick? And nose tackle, a brilliant nose tackle, very rare. They can be a difference maker, but how many of those players are actually out there? And then, the other thing I would say is, I was reading this from Mike Tomlin the other day. He was saying nose tackles going the way of the fullback, that most teams don't even use a nose tackle anymore. That kind of role is a thing of the past. The Steelers use Keanu Benton as their nose tackle, but they're not looking to move him across and then stick a big body in the middle. I think they're looking for quickness to complement what they've already got. So if they don't take Shedeur Sanders, for example, they might take Shamar Stewart and play him as like a big end, bulk him up to 290 and play him there, rather than have a nose tackle replace Benton and shuffle Benton across to the right side of that line. So I'm not sure that the 18th pick on Grant would be a great idea. That said, if you genuinely believe he can be Dexter Lawrence, who is one of the best defensive tackles in the league, then it's a great option. There has been a few other things said about he's kind of got a bit of a quirky character, and we do know that character traits are something that the Seahawks are spending a lot of focus on. So we'll see what happens with that. There are a few options. What about wildcard options? Who are the players in this draft who maybe the Seahawks don't necessarily take at 18, but if they are in this situation, is there somebody out there who could be a surprise target? And I've got a few names here. And again, this might not necessarily be at 18. This might be after trading down. Savon Ravel. when you listen to Savon Ravel Jr., the way that he talks about scheming and his role within the defense at East Carolina, it is highly impressive. He's clearly a very intelligent player. I love the fact that he F's and Jeffs, means he swears, during his interviews as well. So to me, the fact that he talked with as much confidence and mastery of the scheme at East Carolina, but also has that kind of fire in his belly, not only makes him an ideal kind of player for Mike Macdonald, but also makes me think this player's got what it takes. Now, he would have been a first-round pick pretty safely if it wasn't for the knee injury. They had him in for an official visit. They'll have done a medical on Savon Ravel. I just wonder whether, if they've got the all clear on the medicals, if the knee is good to go, and he injured it very early in the season, in the college season, so he's got a bit more of a runway here to get healthy for training camp. If they've got the all clear on the medicals, he is somebody who could be on their radar. I think he is a perfect Mike Macdonald defender. And he has got the ability to be very, very good in the NFL. I don't know how people will respond to that if they take him in the first round, but I don't think anybody should really be that bothered about it, because he would have been a top 25 pick minus the injury. So if he's healthy, if the medicals are good, you might end up getting a bit of a steal. So, I mean, I have been saying if they trade down, they could look at him. They might just take him at 18. I mean, he is a good player. He is a very good player. So that's one name to keep an eye on. I think Donovan Ezeraku could be an option for them. Obviously, in Daniel Jeremiah's mock, he had gone. But what about the Ohio State pass rusher JT Tuimoloau? I don't personally think he would be worth the pick, because I don't think he's a sack specialist. I think he's more of a power, forceful defensive end. And I think his run defense, when you watch the run defense that he has in all 22, it's very impressive. The way he extends his arms, keeps his frame clean. He can sort of see the backfield because he's kept his frame clean. He's got that power and that jolt. Reads the run very, very well. As a run defender, he's very, very good. But he had 12 sacks last season because he had 6 in the playoffs. He hit a hot streak. And pretty much in his college career, he's been like a 6-7 sack guy at Ohio State. And he doesn't come screaming off the edge. And he hasn't got that bend and straighten. So that's not somebody that I would personally be massively excited about. But there are people who think, well, you could maybe unlock him a little bit and you can maybe get his pass rush going. And maybe the Seahawks are one of those teams. And he is somebody that 2 years ago people thought was going to be a high first-round pick. It never really happened for him. But he's somebody who, if he's a local guy, he's got sort of the mentality that they like. He's got the playing aggression that they like. He's got his strong run defender. Maybe they see him as somebody who could be the heir apparent to Cheneroso. I'm looking at wildcard options here. I'm not saying that it's a great idea. I'm just trying to find the players that they might go for that people aren't really talking about. And then the other thing I would say is, what about the tight ends? Elijah Arroyo and Mason Taylor. We know that the top 2 tight ends are going to go pretty quickly. I think Arroyo and Taylor are very talented. I think this offense will benefit from having an exceptional tight end. So, do they like either of these guys enough to take them with their first pick? That's an interesting question to me. And again, I think you have to trade him down. But and I don't want to sort of, this isn't a prediction. This isn't me obsessing about this. But I just keep thinking back to that 2018 draft when Mike Macdonald was with the Ravens organization, when they traded down from 22 to 25 and took Hayden Hurst to tight end. And then they traded up from 52 to 32 to get Lamar Jackson. And just because a Schefter sort of putting this thought into our head that they might be targeting a quarterback, it makes me think maybe they could trade down and maybe take one of these 2 tight ends, just as the Ravens did, and then trade up to go and get Jalen Milroe with one of those 2 second-round picks, moving up from there to go and get the quarterback who Schefter seems to think they're going to be targeting someone there. So, a few wildcard options that they may go for. And, of course, there's other defensive linemen they could go for, or the pass rushers they could go for, or the offensive linemen that I'm maybe missing that they could go for. But just remember, football character, upside, athleticism, grit. They aren't going to take these players with character question marks that, people think, there's, even we're going to come on to Albert Breer's mock in a second here. Albert Breer was suggesting, as a few have, that Nick Emenwari could be an option for Seattle. I do think there's a bit of 2 and 2 plus 2 equals 5 with this, just because Kyle Hamilton was good in Baltimore. If you notice, Nick Emenwari is not in Daniel Jeremiah's first round mock draft. He wasn't in mine, and that's because of the consistent now chit chat of character issues. And I'll just read out what was said. Tom McShay reported, reports about his football character and locker room personality are concerning, as are his inconsistent focus on the field and aggressiveness versus the run. So there you go. And when I watched him on tape, I did not see someone who was flying around and hammering people. And I think at his side, you want to see that. And then Bob McGinn's scouting sources said that Emenwari is naturally contrarian to most everything. And he added, just be sure, he can probably fray some things. You've got to have somebody to deal with the personality. They say this guy is so strong-willed. If you get him onto your side, he'll save the world. If he is opposed to your views, he'll burn the world down. That, to me, just does not sound like somebody the Seahawks are going to draft in the first round. So I think, when you've got to consider those things. And it's why the likes of Egbuka and Starks and Ezeraku and Booker and Zabel have always felt, and you can probably throw Donovan Jackson into this equation as well, they have always felt to me like better fits for Seattle because of that character and leadership and all of the good reports from them. And you can also talk about Jalen Walker and Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren and people like that. Good people who they will want to have in the building, essentially. Quick one on Jalen Walker before we move on. Brady Henderson said last Friday that moving up, it just, maybe they'd move up if Jalen Walker got into range. And every mock draft around that time had Jalen Walker at 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8. And now you're seeing this mock draft with him at 15. And you're starting to think, okay, so is that the reality now? Have people overestimated how early he's going to go? And if he lasts to 15, you can see Denver have moved up from 20 to 13 to go and get Colston Loveland and Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft. If the Seahawks think Jalen Walker is one of the top 3 defenders in this draft, or even better than Abdul Carter, which is what Mike Mayock says, maybe even think he's better than Travis Hunter, who knows? Because a lot of teams think Travis Hunter's a receiver. So they might think Byron Murphy was the top defender on the board a year ago. Jalen Walker's the top defender on their board this year. You've only got to move up 4, 5 spots to go and get him. If you rate him that highly, they could do it. And while with some defenses, Jalen Walker will be like, oh, he's a tweener. Like, we can't play him off the edge. We can't play him at linebacker. We know what we're going to do. I think for Mike McDonald, it's very different. I think he'd see an X factor. I think he'd see a difference maker. And Walker has got those character traits that the Seahawks really want. So I think he could be a star in Seattle. And I don't mean the position. I mean like a top player. So if Walker lasts to this kind of range, rather than trade down like Daniel Jeremiah is pitching here, they might move up and go and get Jalen Walker. It's just something to keep in mind. And then on the trade down, just to finish things off with this, I like the move. I like trading down to 34, and Jeremiah gave Seattle a second rounder next year. I like that move. For starters, the Giants just look like a train wreck. And I don't think that their combination of crap, we haven't got a quarterback, let's sign Jameis Winston. Crap, Jameis Winston can't really start, let's sign Russell Wilson. Oh, let's go and trade up for Jackson Dart. I don't think that's conducive with a winning season. I don't think that's going to be putting the Giants in a position where they're going to be contending for the playoffs. If anything, it might have them contending to be a top 5 pick again. And the chance to sort of move down from 18 to 34 in this draft and get what might be the 35th pick next year, I think is a gamble worth taking. Now, I've seen it. Some people say, oh, well, hang on a minute. You've moved down that far. And then you see Booker come off the board, and you see Jackson come off the board, and you see Connolly Jr. come off the board. That's not good enough. Well, I actually I took up my horizontal board and took all the players off that Daniel Jeremiah had gone. So you're at 34. So the Browns will pick first. You could take Elijah Arroyo or Mason Taylor with that pick. You could, if you wanted to take Tuamalo there, I think that's more palatable than earlier. They're not going to take Walter Nolan because of the character, but that kind of quality of player is there. Will Johnson, I think, was still on the board, wasn't he? Savon Ravel was still on the board. Some people will talk about Nick Emamori, but again, with the character, I don't think they'd go in that direction. And, if you really wanted to take an offensive lineman, I really would not criticize the Seahawks if they took Tate Ratledge or Jared Wilson at the top of round 2. I don't care. I've got second-round grades on them both. I think both players are perfectly plausible picks in that range. And then the other thing is, if their idea is to manufacture a way to get Jalen Milroe, let's just say, then you don't have to manufacture it at 34. You can just take him. And then there you go. You don't have to trade up. Maybe trade up for somebody else. And then you get the second round of next year. So in my opinion, I did not mind the trade. I would rather have the second round of next year and the chance to sort of, take overnight, take stock of where you are. You can spend the whole of tonight. Who are the two players that we really like? Because there's basically the Browns and then there's you on the clock. Who do you really like? You've got two options, and then you take either of those two who are there. I think that's a perfectly okay thing to do for the Seahawks. And I like the trade. I think that, on my board, I have 8 first-round grades. And then I have, let me just remind myself how many players I have in the sort of the next. Okay, I have 32 players in the second tier. So that's 40. So unless you're going to get one of the 8, which in my mock draft, none of the 8 were there at 18, and I don't think any of the 8 are there. Yeah, Malachi Starks. I think, if any of the 8 legit first rounders are there, I think you'd have to consider it. But if they're not, the difference in grading, they're all like the next 32 players on my board, all the way to 40, are going to have similar grades. So being able to pick from that pool at 34 and have a second rounder next year, I'm down with that. And if that's what it takes, because the Giants think we need a big draft. We can't give up 65 or whatever it is, or a fourth rounder or anything like that. We've got to keep all of our picks this year, but we've got to find a way to get a quarterback. We take a second rounder next year, I'd say yes. And maybe you can drive a hard bargain and get it to be a first. I don't know. But I think for the second, I like that. I like the idea of having that extra second next year and still having a whole bunch of picks, 10 picks to pick from. And you're picking at the second round is where the value is going to be, and you're picking there. So I'm down with that. I'm definitely down with that. Got a few super chats. If you want to send them in, I'm going to get to those in a second. But we're going to come off the Daniel Jeremiah mock now, and I am going to bring up Albert Breer's mock draft. So this is what Breer is. I'm going to cycle through it here. He already says, this is what I was talking about, people who do mock drafts. Breer's opening line is, I hate this NFL mock draft, which is exactly the same thing. For 2 days, I was constantly tweaking mine. I turned to my wife at one point and said, I don't know what to do. And you get so frustrated because what you'll do is you'll put a player with a team and then you'll change it out. And then what will happen on the night is that player will end up with the team that you originally thought. And you do that for so many of these picks that you end up thinking you could have got all 32 right. That's not how it works. But because you're being judged, because you're being scored, because people are testing your validity, people are questioning you whether you know what you're talking about off the back of a mock draft. It's just basically like it's like having a parlay or an accumulator and a bet. You're just taking shots and hoping that some of these stick. The person who wins the mock draft competition on Huddle Report is not going to be some kind of guru when it comes to the draft. They just got lucky. When I finished third a few years ago, I got lucky. When I finished 85th or whatever it was last year. I was unlucky. It's just the way it is. So I sympathise with his viewpoint there. Let's run through what he did. So obviously Cam Ward. By the way, I've been meaning to say this on a stream for a while. You Americans, I mean this in an affectionate way. You use the word chalk to describe something that is boring way too much. Like, when did that become a thing? When did chalk, like the number of people who go, oh, this is chalk, when did that become a thing? I don't understand that. We don't do that over here. It's like an obsession in America. The other thing is people using the word facsimile to describe players who are similar. Why can't they just say they're similar or comparable? Why do they have to use the word facsimile? And there's so many. I hear everybody on Seattle radio says it all the time. And then everybody says, oh, this is chalk. That pick's chalk. This top 10's chalk. I don't get it. I don't understand the use of that. Anyway, that's the whinge over. But I feel protective of the English language because I'm English. So then Campbell at 4, Genty at 5. This is what everybody's expecting. He's another one that has Kelvin Banks at 6. Membu at 7's interesting. Like people have been talking a lot about what the Jets are gonna do, and people were initially saying, Tyler Warren. They like Tyler Warren, and then they're gonna go Membu and finish off the line, and and then I said to him today, I think it was McShay saying that they're like locked everything down in the Jets. They're not letting any information out. So where they're getting all this info of like who they like, I don't know. I still think there's a chance that it could be Membu or Warren, but I did notice. I saw this yesterday that they had an official visit with Mason Graham. They went for dinner with him before or after his pro day. It was either side of it, and I think they had a meeting with him at the combine. Like, there's been a lot of interest shown in Mason Graham there. And that, to me, it's why I put him in the mock to the Jets, is because it just, that feels a little bit like connecting the dots. And nobody's really gone for that. Everyone's going to put in other defensive players there or other offensive line players. Like, if everybody really thinks, because everybody seems to put Mason Graham in the top 5 of their big boards and then have him like last into number 11 or number 13. I'm thinking, well, who's wrong? Is the league wrong? Are the big boards wrong? Is the intel wrong? Like, something doesn't connect here. So I had him going 7 to the Jets. And then Jalen Walker 8, Michael Williams 9. Yep, Warren 10. This is all, Nolan at 11's been a thing for a while. Golden or McMillan at 12's been a thing. Mason Graham at 13 here as a mention. Colston Loveland to the Colts. This is all very, very familiar. And then I think it's interesting that James Pierce to the Falcons, that the Falcons just giving up on character to get somebody who can rush the passer is interesting. Jihad Campbell at 16. I think he's going to be one to watch today because I think Jihad Campbell is one of the 10 best players in this draft. But all of the talk is that the labrum surgery might mean that he starts on the PUP list and may not feature as a rookie at all. 2, apparently he needs surgery on, I think he even says this here. Yeah. Breer says he had shoulder surgery, which could land him on the PUP to start the season. He'll probably need the other shoulder fixed too. So he's going to have labrum surgery on one shoulder, and then like at the end of the season, I'm guessing he's going to have the other shoulder done, or maybe they just put him on IR and he gets to the shoulder and we don't see him in 2025. And then there's, he also mentioned he's had knee issues as well. So it starts to build a picture of someone who's like, that's a bit of a flag. And Tony Pauline wrote yesterday that he thinks that Will Johnson, the cornerback, has a lot of injury flags, but will still go in round 1. Jihad Campbell's got a lot of injury flags, but probably won't. So that's why I did not put him in my mock, because of all of this. Then I thought there was the thing about the surgeon coming out and publicly saying he's going to be okay for the season. It's like, well, why do you need to do that if that's true? And then the other thing was the fact that they put a video out. His people sent a video to one of the insiders saying, look at this. He's running on a treadmill again after surgery. Like, great. You don't run with your shoulder, mate. Like that to me feels a little bit like their intel is that he's going to fall, and they're trying to prove that no, he's okay. So we'll see what happens there. Barron at 17, Zabel at 18. He says teams love Zabel. He can play 4 positions. He's tough and smart, and in a lot of ways mirrors Graham Barton last year. If Zabel's not here, or even if he is, South Carolina Nick Emenwari is another name to watch. He could play the Kyle Hamilton role in Mike Macdonald's defense. I think that's just dot connecting because of Kyle Hamilton and Mike Macdonald. Much in the way that people just dot connected Genty to the Raiders because of Pete Carroll. I mean, Macdonald said he's not trying to recreate the Ravens defense. They're trying to create a defense around the players that they've got. Like, the Ravens don't really have anybody like Byron Murphy. Like, Madubuike is not like Byron Murphy. So he's building a different defense and catering it to that sort of talent. I don't think he's going to necessarily go out, and I actually think he'd be better off with a Malachi Starks in this defense than Emenwari. And I think there's so many good, like, you could get Jonas Sanker in round 3. That to me is a much better pick than going with like Emenwari at 18 or after a trade now. And the character things, I just don't think it's very likely. So yeah, Trayvon Henderson at Denver, I had that one as well because of Sean Payton looking for his joker. Will Johnson, I think everyone's kind of thinking that. See, this is what I almost did. I almost put Kenneth Grant to Pittsburgh to bolster their defensive line, and then Johnson to the Chargers, because it just feel like Harbaugh's going to go with a Michigan man. And if Grant was gone, and again, I probably regret this now and will probably kick myself later, I wanted to put Grant at Chargers because I just like the fit. And then I put in Shador at Pittsburgh. Like, if it goes Shador, Pittsburgh, Grant to the Chargers, fantastic. I'll be relieved. But I do think this is a possibility. Grant to the Steelers, Johnson to the Chargers. McMillan, who I don't really rate, lasting to 23. I think Matt Miller was saying, like, McMillan, it's going to be McMillan or Zabel. What about McMillan, says Seahawks? Like, if you've got sort of those slight character flags there, his football character flags, and the fact that he kind of mailed in last season, I don't understand why that would be the case. Or that why would the Seahawks be putting that information out there to Matt Miller of all people? It doesn't really make sense to me. So, yeah, Agbuka to the Rams is a great fit. Starks to the Ravens is a great fit. Derek Harmon apparently has got some injury concerns. Like, there are some flags there about his durability. So we'll see what happens with him. Yeah. So nothing too exciting there, but that's a mock where Zabel does last at 18, even though Breer is talking him up to potentially go earlier. So that's kind of like the latest buzz. I think it's coming up to 6 p.m. over here in the UK, and we've still got another 7 hours to wait. So I kind of wish I could fast forward a little bit, but for me, this is always kind of the best time. Like, that sort of anticipation, so that we still don't know what's going to happen. In 24 hours' time, a lot of the drama will have been answered. We'll know where certain players have gone. Obviously, the Seahawks having 4 at the moment, day 2 picks, as opposed to 1 a year ago, makes day 2 so exciting. But it's just over so quickly. And having started, I think I started watching Tyler Booker was the first player that I wrote up, and I think I started watching him in like June. Like, to go from that to now, all of that work, all of that stuff that's been logged, all of the talking points, the scenarios that we've gone through, the streams, the mock drafts, the horizontal boards, to be here and to be this close now to sort of finding out, it is like Christmas, isn't it? It's so exciting. This is my favorite day of the year, without a shadow of a doubt. It is my favorite day of the year. And I can't wait to see what's going to happen. And I really hope that afterwards, that we're happy with what they've done. I really hope everybody hopes that for their team, but I hope that we've got some answers for the offensive line, and I hope we've got a bit of spark, a bit of interest, something that's a big talking point and get a teeth into after the draft as well. Based on what Adam Schefter's been saying, seems to be the case. Before I do the super chats, quick final thought on that, because it is a fair point, and I think Brian at Hawkblogger raised this on Twitter yesterday, and I think it is an interesting point. we've talked a lot about Milrow, and I do think there's potential there that he could be a guy that they really like, because Mike McDonald has seen what Milrow looks like in an offense, that he's, because he was there at Baltimore with Lamar Jackson, so he knows what a running quarterback can do for an opponent, that they have to game plan for that. He will be well aware that when they played the Steelers twice, the Bengals twice, the Browns twice, that they would have to have an answer every single time for Lamar Jackson. And I bet you can try and find an answer for what happened last time, and you can have different wrinkles just by the running ability. And he has got an amazing arm. It's that sort of intermediate accuracy, the easier passes, fun enough, that Jalen Milrow struggles with. And maybe you can live with a bit of that for the explosive traits and the big plays and everything that comes with it. And they may feel that they can bring him in and develop him. So for that reason, it makes some sense. High character, military family background will appeal to the Seahawks. Just a lot of things that are there that are interesting. I am not a massive Jalen Milrow fan. I'm not going to pretend that for the last 6 months I've been sat here going, get Jalen Milrow into Seattle. It'll be so exciting. I haven't. But if they did it, I'd be intrigued, really fascinated to see how it works out. Wouldn't blame them at all for taking a chance there. Most of the top quarterbacks in the NFL were rough diamonds. Most of them had traits that needed to be harnessed and developed. I think that having somebody who has got massive upside is better than having someone who is limited. Like, if you get, like, who are you going to take a chance on? Cal McCord, who can't run, doesn't have a great arm, but did well in a wide open ACC last year, or someone who's got the physical tools to potentially be something a bit special in the NFL? It's a no-brainer for me. So I have no issue with them doing that. But what if it's not Jalen Milrow who they're interested in? What if they're not trading up for somebody? What if they're just going to take someone in round 2 who Adam Schefter knows they're going to take in round 2, and it's not a name that is being chucked around that much? What if it's Quinn Ewers? What if Ewers, who we've talked about for 2 years, 2 years as a potential target down the line, ever since John Schneider just accidentally brought his name up when they were talking about Jackson Smith and Jigba? He's been working with Mike McCarthy this offseason, who is one of John Schneider's best friends. Brian shared that article, which Ron Slavin, is it? The agent, who's Byron Murphy's agent, who they have a good relationship with. He's Quinn Ewers' agent. Quinn Ewers and Byron Murphy have the same agent. And I've seen the list of whose agents are who, and they share the same agent. So apparently he called him at a high school football game or something and said, hey, I've just found Russell Wilson's future replacement. And he was watching Quinn Ewers. And maybe it's just, and the sort of story was, is like John Schneider will get sick of him reminding him of this story all the time. So it kind of feels like they talk a lot about Quinn Ewers, basically. And it doesn't mean that John's going to take him. We do know that John Schneider went to watch Georgia versus Texas live in person. It's just felt to me a little bit that John will look at Quinn Ewers as somebody that he can relate to. This is somebody who is, maybe relate to is the wrong way of putting it, but somebody that he can sort of, he looks at and thinks, I like the arc that he's been on. This is somebody who was vaulted into mass exposure at a very young age. He was a millionaire as a teenager because of the NIL stuff, and he could go to Ohio State and get $1 million and just sit there for a year on that and then go straight to Texas. That was always the plan for him. And then he goes to Texas and he has issues and battles all along the way, and he's kind of doubled down on his religious beliefs. John is very religious. He's kind of changed his appearance. He's, changed his diet, everything like that. And he's had to battle and scrap and fight, and he has got a natural arm. He does have natural arm talent. It's just not maybe put it to work in the best way that he could. And if you would say to me, what is the best system for Quinn Ewers? It is the Kyle Shanahan offense. It's get the ball out quickly. Don't have to do multiple reads. It is very much similar to some of the concepts that he was running at Texas. So I don't know how, he's not typically a John Schneider quarterback. He's not big, strong Brett Favre. But does every quarterback have to be that? They drafted Brian Brom in Green Bay, there are aspects of like Aaron Rodgers is a much better scrambler and much more creative than Quinn Ewers ever was, but they have some similarities, some technical things they need to work on. They have that same sort of flick of the wrist and the ball flies out. John loved Aaron Rodgers going into the league. So it wouldn't surprise me. And it feels like we've been saying this since last summer, maybe even the year before. It wouldn't be surprised if John Schneider, for some time now, has been eyeing Quinn Ewers. If they draft Quinn Ewers, I know the internet's going to have an absolute meltdown because the internet has decided that he's no good and that he sucks and that there's no worth to be had there. I don't agree with that. I don't think he's awful. I think there's also a lot of stuff that he needs to work on, and there are things that make you sort of wonder whether he's ever going to be a starter in the NFL. But I don't think he's a lost cause. I just think it's something that maybe people need to be ready for. That maybe come Saturday morning, he will be in Seattle, and it won't be Milroe, and it won't be Shook, and it won't be Jackson Dart. It might be Quinn Ewers. It won't be Will Howard. I mean, it could be Will Howard as well, by the way. Like, that is another player who I've been saying consistently could go earlier than people think, and I think some teams will love him. And he is big and mobile and strong and did well, and he's a winner, and the personality ticks a lot of boxes. But this is why I think the Seahawks are going to take a quarterback this year, because you can look at Shook and go, I can see reasons why John Schneider would like him. You can look at Dart and go, I can see reasons why the Seahawks would like him and Schneider. I can see it with Milroe. I can see it with Howard. I can see it with Ewers. So you kind of get to this point where you think they probably are going to take one this year. It's just who, and Adam Schefter's basically telling us it's going to be somebody possibly on the first 2 days. So I'm interested to see what happens there. We haven't got too much long to wait. By Saturday, we will know the answer to these things. And I think they do need to add competition to quarterback, by the way, as well. They didn't bring in Sam Darnold, and people who were saying that, like, I read a Field Goals article saying, stop talking. They're not going to draft a quarterback. Sam Darnold's the guy and all this. There's absolutely nothing in his contract that suggests that. Anyway, let's finish with the super chats. Yo Mamas Lama says, do you think too much importance is put on quarterback draft age? 5 years of cheap control on a Shook at the end of round one. Most teams don't have Super Bowl windows longer than 5 years anyway. I do think age matters to an extent, because if you are bringing Tyler Shook in with the idea that you're drafting him to develop him, if you're drafting someone who's 21 with the mindset that they could sit for maybe 2-3 years if needed, let's say you brought in Jackson Dart instead, and he's much younger, or maybe you go to Ewers because I just know he's 22. If you sat him for 3 years and Sam Darnold, you just took your time as the Packers did with Jordan Love, that's acceptable. If you brought in Shook and sat him for 3 years, he'd be nearly 30 by the time he got an opportunity. So I do think that matters. I think that at the same time, though, it can be an advantage for Shook, because if you're like Cleveland and you need to starting out, he might be more ready because of his maturity and the experiences he's been through to start quickly for you. But I think if you want the most pro-ready quarterback in this draft is Will Howard, and he is a little bit older. But I also think, to make the point that maybe you're making here, that you are right. If the idea is Shook starts now or next year, if you can get 8 years out of him, that's 8 years of a starting quarterback would be a good use of a first round pick. If he becomes a good player in the NFL, there's absolutely the age is an irrelevance in that regard. It's whether or not he can get to that. And I think with his arm strength and his personality and his athleticism, I think he's got a shot. So whoever takes him, if it is in that top 40, I think it's worth a roll of the dice, personally. Sam says, with insiders suggesting Taylor Arroyo are moving up boards to the early 30s, is it worth using 82 to grab one or sticking and grabbing a Ferguson? Well, and regulars will know on Seahawks Draft Blog and on this channel that I've been saying that I think they'll go, in that range anyway. And that Arroyo could go late first, and there's people now saying that Taylor could go late first. I think that's a very distinct possibility that could happen. Probably not for both of them, but for one of them. Like the Eagles have been trying to move on from Dallas Goedert for a while. It would not be a shock to see the Eagles take either one of Taylor or Arroyo at 32. But I think I'm not a huge Terence Ferguson guy. I can understand why he's got the athleticism that you look for in a really good tight end at the pros. There's just something about him for me that is a notch below Taylor and Arroyo. So if they want a tight end, if they really believe in Taylor Arroyo, if they think that one of these guys can be like a game changing tight end, it's such an X factor thing to have in the NFL these days. I would be open minded about moving up to go and get one of those guys. I'd be open minded about moving down and getting one of these guys from 8. If you move down from 18, I would happily do that. I think it's definitely something to consider. And I think in particular, I think both players are going to have really good careers. I think Arroyo, if he can stay healthy, has just got that bit of something about him which could make him a major weapon at the next level. It's just, we don't know what the medical results were. I've not heard anything in that regard. He obviously has had some injuries and didn't do any testing in this pre-draft process, but I really like Elijah Arroyo. Chris says, thoughts on double dipping on the Georgia O-line in round 2? I had no issue with that. Obviously, I think it matters what you do in the first round. Well, maybe it doesn't. Like if you took Zabel and then just went, right, now we're going to get a center and a right guard, I have no issue with that, really. Like placing the focus on those positions to me is fine. And, I think Ratledge is extremely aggressive and big and athletic. I think he's an Eagles-type offensive lineman. Down with that. I think Jared Wilson is more of that Eric McCoy type, but he's obviously had a very good career. I'd be down with that as well. So I would have no issues with that whatsoever. I just don't think it's very likely that they take 2 offensive linemen at 50 and 52. Maybe if they move down from 18 and they do some other stuff, get some other areas first. And the big question for me is just how much, what happens at left guard? Like, does then Christian Haynes move over to a position he's uncomfortable with? Does take Ratledge do that? Ratledge only ever played right guard. Like that big fat hole at left guard is just, it makes me think that one way or another, they're just going to come away with one of Zabel, who's played on the left, Booker or Jackson or Connolly, because they've all left-sided players. And it'll be easier for the left tackles to kick inside, Zabel and Connolly. And obviously Jackson and Booker have played there anyway. So that's kind of how I'm feeling, unless they just think it's like Dylan Fairchild a bit later on. But I think they've got to get a left guard. I don't like this moving around too much. Jan says, happy draft day, Rob. Greetings from Germany. I freaking love Germany. So, Jan, good to have you with us. I love visiting Germany. It's a great country. And this one here says, it is what it is. The Seahawks draft has been a passion of mine for many, many years. Your resilience and sleep schedule to go along with your full-time job is just impeccable and has to be a crazy challenge. Thank you. Well, I mean, to let you in, I really appreciate the super chat and the kind words. To let you know, I have taken today. I had yesterday, today, Friday, Saturday, Sunday off work. So I don't usually do that. What I used to have to do is they have the world. I don't know if people know what snooker is, like a bit like pool, but they have the World Championships in the city that I am from, which is in Sheffield, at this time every year. And what we used to do is we used to do a big live show on the radio with the top snooker players in the world at the venue. And one of those shows used to be on the day of the first round of the NFL draft every year. So I used to have like loads of like day job stuff going on during the day. And then only once that show had finished I think it finished at 8 o'clock, could you then switch off and go, right, time to find out who the Seahawks are going to draft. In one way, it was good because the day just flew by and this day's dragged. But it did mean that it was like very, very busy day job and then straight into this. This year, we don't do that show anymore. We've not done it for a few years now. And to have the time off is both a blessing because I can just throw myself into, I can do a stream like this. I can just watch everything and take everything in. But at the same time, it's dragged like crazy. I'm ready. God, it's only 6 o'clock. The draft starts at 1 a.m. over here. So there was one year, 2018, when I actually was in Florida when the draft was going on. And that was great because it just started in the evening. I could just watch it like normal people. Instead, I'm going to be here till like 1 a.m. And I will probably go to sleep at about 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. I might just stay up and wait till my kids and my wife get up in the morning just to say hello to them and bore them about the draft. They don't care about it, but I'll tell them about it anyway. So that'll probably happen. And then I'll go to bed, get up, having had no sleep, probably just do another one of these streams before day 2 starts and get back into it. But you won't have it any other way. I love the draft, love the Seahawks. Baseball Watcher UK says, Daniel Jeremiah was all over the Arnold to the Hawks last year on draft day when nobody else was. Good point. He mocked them trading back perfect spot for these quarterbacks. I think that is a brilliant point. It's one that I'd forgotten when we were talking about his mock draft earlier. He was the one saying cornerback, and Quinion Mitchell or Terrion Arnold at the 16th pick, and that's what would have happened, apparently, if Byron Murphy was not there. So it's a very good point. I mean, I don't think that means that he's like got the phones tapped at the Seahawks facility, and certainly no one in Seattle will have been leaking that. I think maybe just the teams get a sense for what each other are going to do. But obviously he had a good source a year ago, and maybe the Seahawks are very determined to trade back. And the one thing that was interesting for me is I think what will make it difficult to trade back is the value of the day 2 picks. Teams are not going to want to give up those day 2 picks. So if the Seahawks, and this is a great point. I'm really glad you brought this up right at the end of the stream. So everyone's saying that the Falcons will trade down because they don't have any picks this year and they want the extra stock. People are saying the Minnesota Vikings will trade down because they don't have enough picks this year. They want the extra stock. Well, if teams are not wanting to give up the day 2 stock, then are they going to want to deal with the Falcons and the Vikings? And how interested are the Falcons and the Vikings from moving down when they're not getting anything for round 2 or round 3 or even round 4? Whereas if the Seahawks are saying, we've got 4 picks in day 2, we don't need any more picks in day 2, we're happy with our lot. Give us a second rounder next year so you don't lose any picks this year, and you can move up and get Jackson Dart if you want to, Giants or whatever, and we'll take your second rounder next year, move back to 34. And by the way, our players graded at 18 are going to be graded the same as they are at 40 anyway, so it doesn't matter. And we'll just let the board come to us for day 2. That plan makes perfect sense. Perfect sense to me. And I'm all in on that kind of an idea. And maybe that's what Daniel Jeremiah is hearing. Maybe the reason why he's not got the Falcons trading down instead is because the Falcons don't want to move from all the way in 15 to 34 for a second round pick next year when they've only got 4 picks this year. Well, that might mean that they miss out on a pass rusher. So they're not going to do it. Whereas the Seahawks going, well, we don't care. We'll move to 34 and we'll go and pick there instead. And that makes a ton of sense. And maybe that's what Daniel Jeremiah is hearing. Maybe he's just hearing that the Seahawks are a more viable trade candidate because of their willingness to take stock next year instead of take stock this year. And that could be why they end up moving down and not some of these other teams. Great point on Daniel Jeremiah, and it's inspired that thought, and we'll see if that comes off in a few hours' time. And by the way, I could not give a toss if they don't pick today. Give me the best thing for the Seahawks, the best deal, the best situation. I don't need to see a pick today. In many ways, how exciting would that be to go into tomorrow with 5 picks at least, and knowing that within 2 picks, and you get to spend all night going 2 players, find 2 players. 2 players are going to come off the board. One's going to be from the Browns, one's going to be for the Seahawks. Who are the 2 players? That'd be so exciting to have that conversation. So I kind of almost hope that it happens. And Taker 610 says, O-line, O-line, O-line. Zabel, Rutledge, and Wilson. Let's go for 2 out of 3, if not all 3. Thank you for those super chats. If there is any more, send them in now because I'm going to wrap up the stream. We have done an hour. If there are any more, I'll read them out before we finish. But just to let you know what is going to be in store for tonight. So there will be, if anything happens between now and the draft that warrants an article, I will write it up on SeahawksDraftBlog.com. There will be an open thread. So if you are watching on the NFL Network, because it seems like everybody's doing a live stream now, you may prefer to. The problem with the live streams is they're not going to have the commissioner coming out. And I always think that's the best bit. I'm going to be watching it. I'm not going to be doing a live stream during the first round. I'm going to watch it. I'm going to mute Ian Rappaport every time he comes on so I don't spoil anything. And then when the Seahawks if the Seahawks make a pick, when they make a pick, I will put together a quick video reaction, and that will go on this channel. So make sure you subscribe. And as soon as they've done the pick, I will have a video, a short blast of some analysis. It will only be a few minutes long on Seattle's pick. And that will go up immediately after the pick is made. So subscribe. You won't miss that. You'll know where to find it. Rob Staten Football. But make sure you subscribe to the channel so you get that. At the end of the first round, so as soon as the first round finishes, we'll be coming on and doing a live stream. Robbie and I will jump on. We'll talk about the Seahawks. We'll talk about everything else, and we'll do like our instant reaction to everything that's happened. As soon as I've done that live stream, I will write an article for SeahawksDraftBlog.com, which will be giving my thoughts on everything from the first round as well, and that will go on there. Tomorrow, I will probably do another stream like this at around this time. So about 9 a.m. Pacific time, I'll come on and do another stream like this. Again, if there's anything I want to write about during the day, it'll be on SeahawksDraftBlog.com. We are considering doing a live stream throughout day 2. Now, if all of Seattle's picture in day 2, like Daniel Jeremiah is suggesting, then that could be an interesting live stream to do, and we'll be on for the whole thing. But we'll play that by ear. We'll see. We'll see what we're going to do with that. So stay tuned for more information on that tomorrow. But just make sure you stick it here. Rob State and Football will have great analysis on everything to do with the draft of the Seahawks. SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Give us a follow. Give us a subscribe. Hit the like button. Leave a comment in the comments section. Draft day's here. Can't wait. Can't wait to see what the Seahawks are going to do. Fingers crossed it all goes according to plan. Thanks for the super chats. Thanks for your company. Great listening live numbers for this. Really appreciate everybody sticking with us. Be sure to join us a bit later on for the live stream after the first round. Till next time, bye for now.